So Janice, do you want to do the roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Town of Ashland, Mr. Martin,
Present.
Mr. Root.
Hello.
Hello. Chesterfield County, Mr. Plymale, Mr. Richwine, Goochland County, Mr. Basham, Mr. Goyne, Hanover County, Mr. Rasnick, Henrico County, Mr. Dixon, New Kent County, Ms. Guthrie,
Here.
Mr. Moyer. I think we're gonna have to, we need to remove Mr. Moyer from the list. Yes, sorry about that. Powhatan County, Mr. Powers. City of Richmond, Mr. Bunn.
Here.
Chair Erickson, I know is not with us. Miss Almond, Mr. Smith. Chamber RVA, Mr. Easter.
Present virtually.
Thank you. League of Women Voters, Miss Weisiger,
Here.
Miss Rosenblum. NAACP, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Willis. RABA, Mr. Burnley, Mr. Hamilton. Richmond Office of Equitable Transit and Mobility, Miss Rowan.
I am here and I will not be able to stay the whole time, and I've asked another OETM staff member, Ernest, to join. So if you see him join, he's gonna step in for me when I'm unable to be here, if that's okay with this group.
Okay, thank you. RVA Rapid Transit, Miss Walker,
Here.
Mr. Hankins. Senior Connections, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Virginia Conservation Network, Mr. Gordon. Ms. Higgins. Virginians for High Speed Rail, Mr. Testerman.
Here, and Herbert Richwine had a medical procedure yesterday, so he wasn't able to join us. I was planning to bring him, but he was hoping he could listen in.
Okay, thank you.
I gave
Virginia
him,
Common, sorry.
I gave Mr. Richwine the connection information, so he may dial in.
Okay. Virginia Commonwealth University, Mr. Leonard.
Present.
Thank you. We have one. One second, please. Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, and we do have a quorum.
All right.
Okay, thank you. It looks like spring break has started early with some folks, so thank you all for being here. We'll go ahead with the agenda with Section A, Administration, approval of the CTAC minutes from January 18th. We'll take a look at those. See if there's a motion to accept.
I so move. We accept the
All
minutes.
right, John has moved and Upton has seconded that the minutes be adopted from the January meeting. All right, taking a look at the agenda, are there any additions or anything else that you see on the agenda that needs to be changed? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the open public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to the CTAC today, public?
Yeah. Well, that's okay. That's all right. Let me just,
Okay, you're on the meeting call, yeah. All right, seeing no public representative wishes to speak, we'll move on to the CTAC Chairs report. And unless you have something to say during this period, we'll skip that. Move on to agency updates with Miles.
Sure. So I'll start with the
TPO, Plan RVA, all those updates, and then
Okay.
Mr. Parsons is here as well for the
Okay.
CBTA
All right.
if needed. But I think some of the big updates for March. So as you all know, with the elections, we have a lot of new members. So we have been going through a lot of orientation with all of our board members. So the TPO and Plan RVA had a joint meeting in February to go over just orientation and where everything is. And then we've also just been diving a little bit deeper into all the topics at the board meeting. So if you have a chance to watch any of the TPO meetings, it's also a good refresher. We're going through that same planning circle that we talked about, and diving into how all of the work relates back to that planning process. I think the biggest thing from the TPO right now is that they approved the list of RSTP CMAC projects and TAP projects for this round at their last meeting. So we have the priorities identified for TAP and for CMAC funding for this upcoming year. There were, I believe, 7 new CMAC projects that were included in that list. And then I guess Mr. Parsons is here if he wants to give an update on CBTA, but a lot of exciting funding news on the CBTA side.
Can I interrupt you just a minute? If you have an opportunity, I don't know if it came up during the orientation of the new members, but impress upon them the need to have representatives appointed to CTAC. Chet?
Before you go, can you describe what CMAC is? Can you
Sure.
break down that?
So the TPO has basically 4 different funding programs that the policy board actually gets to direct which projects are selected and funded. So CMAC is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. So that's dedicated to project types that will basically reduce emissions of ozone precursors in our region. So it's a lot of bicycle and pedestrian projects, intersection improvements, and transit improvements. We've also done some projects at the port, trying to reduce idling and emissions from the port facilities.
Thank you.
Mike?
Do we still have to worry about non-attainment?
So we are in a tricky sort of middle ground situation right now. So the region has been in attainment for a while. We don't have any issues with air quality. We meet all of the standards. However, there was a court case back in, I think it was 2018, that basically required us to continue demonstrating that we are complying with the old standards from the 90s that we, in the early 2000s, weren't meeting. So we've made progress, but we still have to demonstrate that we're complying. Basically, what that means is anytime we're looking at changing the TIP, so our transportation improvement program, or anytime we're looking at updating our long-range transportation plan, we have to ensure all the projects are listed out and we know which ones have capacity increases, which could potentially impact air quality. So interchange projects, widenings on arterials, interstates, that sort of thing. And we have to list them and go through a process where we coordinate with VDOT, Tri-Cities, and then some of the federal agencies as well to make sure that all the process is being followed, but we're not still doing all the modeling and all the complicated work that we used to have to do.
Thank you.
Chet?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I think it's supposed to be page 9 in your agenda packet is the CBTA summary, but I think the big news is at its last meeting on February 23rd, the CBTA acted to approve round 3 of its regional funding cycle. So since the creation of the authority in 2020, there have been 2 rounds of regional funding. The round 3 was approved in February. And that, the numbers there, it committed just over $230 million to fund 22 additional priority projects in the region. This funding is roughly 35% of the revenues that CBTA receives over time. So it's a big commitment, it's a big step. And overall, through all 3 rounds, we funded, we'll say 67 projects with regional funding alone. And that is close to $625 million. The process itself is a competitive application process, which starts about 6 months, give or take a month or 2 before the awards are announced. And the members of the authority are the eligible applicants. So the counties in the town of Ashland, city of Richmond, There's a lot of eligibility criteria that need to be met for a project to be considered regional. And be happy to provide more information about that if you'd like to see it. So overall, there was a good mix of projects. Each round has changed slightly. The first round of funding, the initial round of funding was 97% committed to the fall line, the regional trail. The second round of funding was a good mix of projects that continued fall line funding, some highway funding, as well as the funding to help support the widening of I-64 through New Kent, that 29-mile gap. And then this third round, again, a different kind of mix of projects, highway funding, more transit funding this time around to support continued development of BRT, the north-south route, as well as the downtown transfer, or the downtown transit hub. Is that the right term for it?
Transfer station.
Transfer station, yes. So there was funding in a lot of different areas this time. So we will now start, we're in a 2-year cycle, so we'll now look towards an off year where we can support existing projects and then go for another round of regional funding to be announced in spring of '26.
A question for you. Is the TAC for the CBTA comparable to the TAC for the TPO? Or they're usually the same individuals involved?
Yes, yes, it's usually the same individuals. Usually a lot of people that have been around and understand all of the needs and have been involved in these conversations. So it's really a short learning curve for a lot of the jurisdictions.
Any questions of Chet?
I have one.
Sarah?
For the regional projects that are for highway spending, when you score them, do you consider the bicycle, pedestrian, transit movement around these projects? I mean, does that work into the score? I know that they're not actually pedestrian projects, but generally.
Right. There's the scoring for the projects so that they can be compared to each other. In say the highway category is all kind of a streamlined version of the scoring that's done by the MPO for the long range transportation plan. So for the highway projects, there are separate requirements, as I think you're aware, that new capacity needs to seriously consider bicycle pedestrian improvements and everything else. But one of the ways that we capture that for scoring CBTA projects is the safety of the projects. And we do require applicants to submit the data about what the project's going to do and how it's going to impact all users of the facility. We also look at an equity component and accessibility. Those are combined, so that looks at what are you able to reach through these improvements? Does it provide access for all different kinds of users? So I don't think to answer your question directly, I don't think there's a singular bicycle and pedestrian component, but those considerations are built into the other measures that we ask for.
But could there be, or?
I think there could be, but you'd also want to consider, is there a transit component? Is there I think we want to be holistic in what we consider, so I'm not sure that pulling out a bike ped factor by itself.
Or non-car, I guess.
Yeah.
The transit.
Yeah.
That you could change it so you're looking at corridors that would have transit or corridors that would allow for the movement of pedestrians and bicycles. You could have that as a criteria.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't want to extend this out more than you want, Madam Chair, but the eligible corridors for highway improvements, some of those are major arterials, interstates, where I don't think we want that kind of conflict. So once you get kind of down into we're considering mainly the regionally significant roads like, Chippenham, 288, Broad Street. So some of the roads that are eligible for funds would have a need to have those considerations. But I think some of the roads wouldn't, so, but we could certainly, include those types of measures if the technical committee and the authority wants to do that.
Will there be an opportunity with the Plan RVA, I can't remember if it was Plan RVA or the TPO specifically, got the funding for looking at climate impacts to transportation? Maybe, can you comment on that? Where did that grant come from? And is there an opportunity for CBTA to take some of those recommendations into consideration into your board's deliberations?
Sure. I mean, I can chime in on where we are with Plan RVA. So we received a climate pollution reduction grant through the EPA. And it's basically a two-step process. So the first part was a really quick study period, and we had to come up with what was known as our priority climate action plan. So that was basically quick and dirty greenhouse gas emissions summary for the region, and then what priority projects that are ready to go now could we fund to be able to move the needle.
Right.
So from out of that, what we had was recommendations for BRT expansion. We had recommendations for finishing the Fall Line Trail as that key regional spine to building a broader trail network. So those projects are things that we're still pursuing through both that program and other grant opportunities. And then what we're doing now, or will be doing very soon, is a comprehensive climate action plan for the region. So it's MSA wide, so it includes us, Tri-Cities, and areas outside of the MPOs, but it's basically a more holistic review. And that's, I think, a little bit of a longer process, maybe 2 years. And so that process, when that's completed, obviously any of those recommendations will funnel into the long range plan as well. I think that's part of us looking at all the other regional planning, and then the long range plan changes the scoring, which generally filters down to CBTA. So I think it's a process, but I think whatever comes out of that process will be included in the transportation planning as well.
Lisa, John has his hand up.
John Easter? Okay.
Yes, yeah, thanks. Hey, Chet, can you, having been involved in trying to get CVTA set up originally at the General Assembly, of course, there was a very strong supermajority requirement that was put in there. Now that we have a few years of history, can you sort of give us a sense of how that has played out? Is everything pretty much done unanimously and by consent? Are they able to come to agreement so far on things, or how has that been working out?
Yeah, that's a great question, John, thanks. So far, I mean, I think that the authority has acted unanimously in most of the cases where there's a decision that needs to be made. The voting procedure and the weighting of the votes does require for coordination, especially among the more populous jurisdictions in the region. If one of the big three says no, then the vote is dead. So that's something that is considered at all levels. And for the most part, there has been very collegial, collaborative decision-making, not just among the urban populations, but making sure that all 9 jurisdictions in the region are accounted for and have received benefits from the CBTA. Aside from the 50% funding that goes directly back to the jurisdictions already. So I think that the history of the authority is a good example of how to make decision-making work as a region. We will see moving forward, I expect to see the same type of patterns, even with all the new members that have come in over the past 6 months. But I'm working closely with everyone and bringing everybody up to speed on how the authority operates and what the practices have been so far.
Thank you.
May serve as a model for the General Assembly. All right, no further discussion. We'll move on. That's all you have, Miles? Okay. All right, let's look on to new business, and do you want to pass these out?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to pass out the public engagement plan. And if you will, turn to page 19 when you receive yours. What about the folks online, Holly?
Just sharing that with them right
Okay,
now.
all right.
And while you're handing those out, this is Kelly. I also, like I said, invited Ernest, and he's online now, but he's in attendees. I don't know if I need to move to make him my alternate or some formal action. But he's on.
I just sent him an invitation to move over as a panelist, so he should be moving over.
Okay,
And
awesome, thank you.
Also, Janice, Gordon Dixon has arrived, so if you'll mark him present, please.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And may I ask, what is the, I have a request for a new alternate as well. Is there a process for that, or should I just?
Because Richard has moved on, so they need to have an alternate. So, we'll talk to you afterward, but
Okay.
yes, we can switch out your alternate.
Yeah, and VCU, our alternate Jesse McClellan has moved on, and so we'll be looking for a new alternate
All right,
also.
thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Anybody else? Because there's quite a few people whose organizations aren't represented at all, which is an ongoing challenge for us. Sarah?
Yeah, we'll, maybe be looking for a new, place a new alternate.
Okay.
Good,
Okay.
good.
Is there a form that you'll send them to?
There has been a form.
There's a
per
form,
se.
yeah, or something that has to be in writing, you know
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Send it to me too, please.
Okay,
Okay.
all right,
So,
Holly.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
So this public engagement plan that you're holding, nothing is new about this than what you saw last time, except for page 19. So that's all that we need to do today is to look at, hey, we asked for public comment on this public engagement plan for a required 45 days at minimum, to say, hey, tell us what you think about this. So everything you're holding, you've seen and approved at our last meeting, which was, we feel like this is good to go and ask the public to give us input, and page 19
And
is
how
what we have.
was this achieved? How did the public?
It was
comment?
shared on our website and
Okay.
through our social media and our communication channels. And so the comments that are here are not very extensive, and I feel like probably if we were looking for a historical perspective, in 2020, which I guess was the last time we did this, there were more comments, but I think that's also because it was the pandemic. And while the pandemic changed a lot of ways that we could engage with folks, people were online more and had a lot more time, I think, to be able to do things like public comment. So there's pros and cons to the fact that we don't have a ton of comment on here, but honestly, I think that's okay, because as we've established, this is the plan to plan. What we really want to get to the meat of is doing the actual engagement. And so this is just the rough framework to kind of set us up for success for creating public engagement. So you'll see there's not a lot of comments here that are actually really giving feedback on the plan. Some of them are, and some we've made some comments to address the questions here. And so my call to the group is, we made comments as staff feedback and wanted to check to see if that feels like the right answers to you, if we feel like those are okay. And then the second question is, our next step is we just need to say, hey, as CTAC, this is ready to be approved and go to the next step, which is to go to the TPO board for approval of the entire plan at the next meeting, which is April, Miles? It's April, early April, yeah.
Yeah, 4th, I think.
Yeah.
I think some people are trying to speak, but we can't see who they are. If there's someone who has their hand up online, we can't see who you are, so just speak out.
I wonder if it's my feedback in the microphone.
Maybe so, yeah.
So thoughts about the comments here, right? There's a lot of them are pretty simple. Some are just essentially saying, hey, I care about these things, so it's good that we're hearing that. Somebody had a question about some grammar, which we updated, and then the other question was just asking about compensation as a possibility for attendance. And so a reference point we gave was just kind of the best practices around equitable engagement, and then referenced a resource at the Urban Institute, which actually talks in long detail about why that is an equitable practice.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll need to have a motion and a second to advance this to the TPO.
I so move.
Second.
John and Gordon.
Excellent, great. Thank you all very much for your work on that.
Thank you. All right, who's,
Sorry?
You need to vote on that motion, right?
well,
We could just do a voice vote, I think. I don't think you need a roll call.
we didn't,
I wasn't
Holly
sure if we
didn't-
needed a vote. I'm sorry. If I misspoke, that's my fault.
all right, well, let's go ahead and vote just to clear that up.
Okay.
All those in favor of advancing this to the TPO, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you, Ken.
Okay. All right, who is doing the debrief on the March 15th transportation forum?
We didn't really discuss that, so I feel
Okay.
like I'm opening it to the floor. I know many of you were there, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the members of CTAC who attended and were table hosts for us. Several other of you attended as concerned residents as well. I think it felt like a huge success just based on the amount of feedback we got about it, and I'm so pleased that this is one of the first events I got to be a huge part of since I've started at Plan RVA, so it makes me really proud to be a part of this team. So I want to give a special thanks to the CTAC table hosts who helped lead that activity, which were Lisa and John, yeah, you were there, no, not John, Gordon and Faith and Sarah, who's not here, and Michael and, am I missing anybody? I think that was everybody. Yeah, that was everyone. And then the staff, of course, Miles was one, Ken was helping out. Lots of folks were there. I saw Sarah, right? So thank you. I don't know if the other staff in the room have thoughts they want to share, if any of the transportation folks want to give any feedback. I would like to share a little bit of a very nice email that we got about it, just kind of about the importance of the regional collaboration, but wanted to open it up to the floor.
I thought the speakers, the citizen speakers, did a marvelous job. And I think that was different than what we had done in the past, where we just had kind of policy staff speak or, some ceremonial comments from elected officials. I think having them talk about their experiences with buses and their experiences with biking to work with children, I thought that was illuminating. Kind of concerning about the baby in the back, but nevertheless, I think it shows that we have some dedicated citizens who want to make this work. And I thought that was great, and that kind of set the tone for the table activity and the collaboration there.
There's a hand up on screen.
All right, there's a hand up. Speak up, I can't see who you are.
Don Root.
En route. Yeah, I also thought much the same. The real life stories of the mother with the child using the bike to go back and forth was stimulating. The only comment, and I think everyone had the same problem, was with the stickers on the mapping exercise. The yellow ones, it was real difficult to see what numbers you were putting on the map. Just no contrast on the stickers, but overall, very positive experience.
Thanks.
I would echo everything that was said, and it was really powerful to see an agency leader, an elected official, and a bus rider all working on something together. So that was really great, and I thought the event was beautifully done. Great work.
And I'm thinking that maybe that table exercise is something that we might want to replicate in Newkent, just because it's so hard to get feedback, to have something where people are talking to each other and engaging and feeling like they're a part of their future. I think that would be positive.
I'd echo your all's comments on that, but also would say, at least the table where I was hosting, I'm not sure, were there assigned tables?
No.
Just random, so, interesting, because I had the Hanover Mafia with me. But it was fun, because it was folks I'd known from previous lives, so it was kind of good to kind of connect with them, and it was actually county officials, both Hanover, mostly Hanover and some Chesterfield. Maybe to try and mix it up, you almost provide assigned seats to, at least for maybe some of those government officials, to purposefully move them around. Our comment was we had the the Hanover County manager and 4 or 5 of his staff, and they all deferred to him on a lot of the comments. So that was an interesting component to it. But I think it also showed, even with the rural localities, there's definitely a increased demand for additional services in transit. And that was kind of a lot of the debate that they were having is that there's more demand than there seems to be supply in that, especially in the rural communities, at least from the table I was at. Good discussion though.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, can I add a comment?
Sure, John.
I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I especially wanted to give kudos. I thought the table exercise was really done about as well done as I've seen one done before, for getting people thinking and getting them talking to each other. So whoever came up with that concept, very well done. Obviously the testimonials were great and powerful. I would say that venue is awfully crowded for that number of people. You know, yes, there are advantages to using that venue. I understand that. But whether or not it makes sense to do that, if we're going to have that number of people, it's just so tight in there that makes some challenges.
I know that the management of the rest of it is under a different umbrella. So if we could spread out in there, that would make a big difference.
Yes, what a gift to have that we have exceeded the demand for the space we have. So yes, we are absolutely going to be thinking about that for next time. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for participating in that.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that the speakers themselves, at least Courtney and Meg specifically, were, I think, very happy to share their stories, and I really enjoyed them. And both of them, I think, came to me specifically and said, thank you for the opportunity to tell this story. It felt really good to kind of put my thoughts together in this way. And as Courtney even said on stage, you know, I'd never done anything like this before, she said. So I love that it felt both good to the audience to receive it and also to the people to share their stories. Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to seeing where we are with the member engagement opportunities and that cycle. And I think we will get Miles to speak to that first, and then you, Holly. Miles?
Thank you, and hello everyone again. One of the things that we committed to a while back when we first introduced this new concept was that when we had time, we would be doing deeper dives into the planning cycle and why public engagement matters at different points in the planning process. So what we're starting with today is that first stage in the cycle, which is the identifying issues and solutions part of it. So let me advance the slide. So just as a refresher, we identify issues and solutions. We prioritize the solutions through our long-range plan. We go out and get funding for those projects. We get them authorized to use the federal money. We build them, and then we see how we did, see what the output was, what are the outcomes, and then start the whole cycle over again. So this is really a case study on the first point of identifying issues and solutions. And the project that we're using is the new Osborne Turnpike, which, if anyone has been following kind of the CBTA side, there was quite a bit of comment that was generated with a proposal to look at that road again, and it all stems back to a planning study of about a decade ago. So that's where we wanted to go back to that study that came out a decade ago and where that got us to where we wound up today. So this is kind of the concepts that were being discussed at the time. It was basically a study that was undertaken, and I'll go into it a little bit more, but it was being undertaken through the PDC in coordination with the City of Richmond, Henrico, VDOT, DRPT, to look at the east end of Henrico going into the City of Richmond, so 7th Street all the way out to 895. And there were a lot of planned developments out in the area, well, on the James, Tree Hill, there's large developments, thousands and thousands of new units. So it was looking at, do we have capacity on the roadways to handle all of this? And so part of that process was looking at transit. So there were BRT recommendations, there were park and ride and express recommendations, but other parts of it were adding capacity to the roadways that came out. So these were two concepts that when it got to the end of the study, these were kind of the last two sticking points on what do we do here. And the options were basically to look at widening Route 5 itself, or to widening New Osborne Turnpike and then crossing over the rail yard with the big bridge and going into 60. So those were the two alternatives that were developed. So this is kind of the overview of the corridor and a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned. But a lot of what came out of that was public involvement. So the public really caught on to, hey, all this planning's happening. We need to be involved in what's happening on the east end of Henrico. So we had 3 different public workshops during the 18-month study. There were citizen members on the study as part of the work group. There was a lot of media coverage. I mean, every possible media forum was covering it at the time. A lot of discussion, community organizations that came out strongly opposed to it and were writing letters to the mayor, writing letters to the supervisors in Henrico. A lot of public input was being received from all of this comment and all the attention that was brought to it. And what ultimately happened, so that study wasn't accepted, or it was accepted as done, but they didn't adopt any of those recommendations. So they didn't pick to widen Route 5, they didn't pick to widen New Osborne Turnpike. They said, well, thanks, we finished the study, this is an option that's out there, but we're not gonna advance either right now. Since that time, those community organizations in Eastern Henrico have been very involved in all of the transportation planning process. So in the last long-range transportation plan update, we received a lot of comments about proposed projects in Eastern Henrico, and most of them that were capacity-type projects, adding new lanes, wound up on our vision list, which meant they weren't really in the constrained plan. They're not identified as something that's a priority for the next 20 years. And then Henrico has actually gone back, and this is part of what we saw through the CVTA process, but Henrico's gone back to the drawing board and refined the concept and said, you know what, we're not gonna go with 4 lanes, we're gonna go with 2 lanes with dedicated turn lanes. And so that's the process that they've been working through. They're working on a study right now to wrap up that refinement, and then design work to be able to do some of the preliminary engineering that's needed has been funded through the CVTA to move it forward. So this is kind of a simple walkthrough of how that process works, but I think what it really highlights is going back to that very first stage where we are identifying what the issues were and coming up with proposed solutions. When the public got involved, it changed the shape and direction of where things were headed. So I think that's really, and this is all we're intending to do with these, but kind of highlighting why it matters and why do we want you guys to help us get the word out and get people involved in this process, because it does shape what actually gets built in the region. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this, but again, this is just intended to be a highlight, and we're going to do this whenever we have a chance moving forward.
I think we've got an excellent opportunity here for a success story of how the planning cycle works, you know? The jurisdiction took the input and thought about it and decided to implement in a different direction, but still the fact that the public input was there was a driving force.
Some of those groups, I remember that whole debate, some of those groups are still out there and still strong, you know?
Would you say that since the planning that is done in that, would you say that the planning has taken a somewhat more participatory turn as far as engaging groups like that more on purpose rather than throwing something out there and letting them pop up?
Sure. So I think the question is really, has the planning process been more participatory and had the public involved? And I think Henrico has done several studies since this time and involved the community on Route 5 itself. So there's a separate Route 5 plan now that's been looking at kind of more narrowly at the Route 5 corridor. As I mentioned, they're looking at New Osborne Turnpike now through planning studies. So they're being more intentional with the studies and making sure everyone's updated, knows what's going on the process. And I think it really is a response to hearing that people have concerns about what happens with a particular place. So I think yes to that question, and I think to Mr. Root's comment earlier that yes, it is a success story on that end.
Okay, well, that's encouraging for our work ahead of us. Holly?
Thank you. So I want to tell you all, before we get to our activity, which is going to be kind of the good chunk of our meeting today, is a little bit about the next opportunity for input and for engagement, which is scenario planning. So let me just pull up my notes here, and I'm going to give you the quick overview, and then if you have detailed, in-depth questions, Sulab is in the room and can answer them for you, because this is my first time seeing scenario planning, but I am very excited and nerdy about this because it is very exciting and nerdy in that, you know, and let me practice my elevator speech on you for a minute, because I've only been writing this down, I have not said it out loud. Which essentially, scenario planning is a long-term process to consider how all of the different ways we have inputs in could generate a different regional future, right? So that's things like economic factors, community factors, demographic factors, environmental policies, technological factors, how all of these things put in together and the choices we make about them might lead to a different regional future. So what the scenario planning team has done is they've actually come up with an interactive matchmaking tool that we're calling the scenario selector, that is a way for people to say, I care about this, I care about this, I care about this. What kind of future would that give me? So it kind of forces you to pick some choices. So it's just a quick little exercise. It's not a lot of questions. I think it's total maybe 4 questions that give you if this then, and then you can actually look at the kind of regional future scenario that would give you. So we just launched that this week, that week, all the way around. I'm wondering, I don't have it to share with you, but I wonder if Sid, we could just pop it into the visual here to show them, the link to the scenario selector. We have it on all of our social media this week, so if you go to our LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, you can actually click on it and participate. You're gonna get an individual invitation from us after this directly, but if you wanna do it, before we email you that's step 1, which is play around with the scenario selector. And it basically gives you, if this, then what? And then you get a chance to read a little bit more about kind of the methodology behind it. So if I ended up with this future, what does that mean? And what is all the background data around that? So if you're a data nerd like me and you want to go and look at it, you can see a little bit more. Yeah. What happened? Is it the bottom? Well, so this is telling you a little bit about scenario selector, the drivers behind it, and gives an example of one of them, and then the actual survey asks you to choose between them. Yeah. So that's quick. So one thing we'd love for CTAC to do is help us share that, right? Like we want to get the word out. Tell your friends. This is it's kind of like an easy way to get people excited about what is probably a complicated process, right? And that is ultimately our job, is how do we break down things that are very technical and very important in a way that a person who lives in this region wants to care about it and wants to get involved. Because all of you were there at one point, right? You're here because you care and you want to get involved. So that's step 1. And then at the end of that process, once you look through everything, there's going to be an actual kind of evaluation survey, which is, hey, were you surprised by anything? What did you think? Are you excited? Are you scared? And then tell us about you, right? So we can just collect a little bit more information about the kind of people we're talking to. So all of that is on our social media right now. You're gonna get a personal invitation from us after to participate with this, but we would love if you could just share that with your networks. So you can either share it on social, pop it in an email. I'll give you the very pretty language so you can pass it on to your friends. Take it to a dinner party this weekend, however you wanna share it with folks. And then part 2 is we're actually going to do a charrette about this. So charrette is basically just a group of people coming together to talk about a topic and workshop some ideas in real life together. So on April 15th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're hosting a charrette about this with some of the consultants who have helped the transportation team develop this. The charrette started last year, I believe, with kind of the first steps in getting public input on this. And so, again, I will have a personalized invitation for you. We just finalized the details for this week, so I'll have that personal invitation to you when we leave here. If you can come to that, we would love to have you, where we will take all of the public input that is here, a little bit more of the methodology. You get to go in more depth to read about all of this background and also start to make some decisions about what are the investments and policy decisions we have to make as a region to get to the good scenario futures and or to prevent some of the futures we maybe don't want. And so that's where we really want the public input. So we want both content experts, transportation experts, environmental experts, but we also want people who are community leaders who maybe don't always get asked these questions and who are representing voices that aren't always heard. So as always, we want to expand and diversify our audiences who get to give input. Caveat, we only have about 80 spots. So space is limited. So if you're real excited, I want you to claim one of those spots first. It's free. It's going to be downstairs at the former Hatch Local Food Hall. So Hatch Local is closing, as you might have heard. We're going to get to take over 1/2 of it for that day. So it'll be right here on site, essentially, April 15th, 10 to 2.
But this is pretty much limited to who you invite. This is
Yes.
not something that we go
Correct.
out and find people to attend.
Yes, so it's not mass input, really, we want the people who are in the positions to make decisions, who have the decision-making authority to change some of these policy and investment pathways. But I don't only want it to be like, well, I don't work in transportation, so this is not for me. If it feels like you have authority in decision-making and this is the right audience for you, that's y'all, right? Like, you are some of these people. This is not so much the thing I want you to share at a dinner party and tell the whole world, right? We will get there. We will have other opportunities for this, but this is just, we're constrained by space, right? So, yeah, good question.
Is a
Thank you.
question?
Okay, so I'll have that in writing for you. I'm sorry, I don't have that right now. I just knocked out some of this yesterday. So, any questions about scenario planning? Okay,
How long is the survey for the scenario planning open?
about a month. So from now until about the middle of April, yeah. Good question. Also, the charrette is free and we're gonna feed you and pay for your parking, and transit is available right out front, so, yeah.
So would pretty much any computer that you can access the internet work on the scenario
Yes,
planning?
yes. It's just a simple click, 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 yeah.
Um,
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, now it's time for us to do some work.
Okay.
Yep.
Take some of these, well, okay, let me just pass those that way, you guys have some already. I'm gonna take it and pass it down.
Yes, you may.
This is a worksheet that Sarah Erickson, the chair, developed, which came out of response to somebody in CTAC, or many of you in CTAC a few months ago, saying, hey, when we were talking about who's in your community that we should make sure that you are helping us reach, right? Because you all know your communities better than anyone. What are those circles? What are the places that we should be thinking about going? And so Sarah created this worksheet to help us think correctly about where the places are. And then she and Andrew took a stab at filling it out with, here are the things that exist in the city of Richmond. And then John, who was an overachiever, also filled it out for VCU and his circle of life. So we've got some examples to give you. But what I want to do for the next 20 minutes is I would like you to partner up with somebody in the room that you do not know very well. And I want you to work together on trying to identify in this worksheet, where are the holes and where are the communities and where are the places that exist in New Kent? What are the places that exist in Ashland? What are the places that exist in my neighborhood in the south side of Richmond? And to start to kind of compile that so that either it might be obvious to you, but maybe your person that you're working with doesn't know as well, and you might be like, well, I have this group in New Kent, and that might inspire Andrew to say, oh, I didn't even think about that kind of group. I should think about who that group is in the city of Richmond. So I want the power of our collective brains today to start to kind of populate this worksheet. Now, if you're online, you got sent the worksheet digitally, so you should be able to fill it out yourself. If you don't have a copy of it, just put in the chat maybe, and we can make sure you get a copy. We can probably paste that in just a second. I want to get a time check of where we are. It's 12:48. So let's come back just a little bit after 1 o'clock to kind of debrief the activity that we did, and we can take a little bit longer if we need to, but I want to give you like a full 15, 20 minutes to start working this out together. While you're doing that, I'm going to come around and give you the examples that Andrew and John and Sarah had. So if you feel like you're getting stuck and you're like, I have no idea who to even ask, we've got some examples for you, okay? So find somebody in the room you don't know, maybe get up, move to a sunny spot,
All right.
and work together, and we'll come back just a little after 1, okay?
Okay.
And
Can
folks
I
who are on,
ask a question?
yeah,
When I saw at least an earlier version of this form, it was sort of organized by jurisdiction. Is there a way to provide format? So for example, I would like to give you the leads of various chambers that are in all these different jurisdictions in the area, but they're not all in one jurisdiction. Is there a way to submit this that isn't, organized by jurisdiction, basically?
sure, yeah, that's a good point. We didn't frame it that way, but just for simplicity, why don't you just put next to it what jurisdiction it is, right? So if
I mean, it'll be obvious from the name, but if I just don't
fine.
have to do a separate form for each jurisdiction. would be
No,
okay.
no, that's fine,
Okay.
that's fine, yeah.
Okay,
And this-
thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Does anybody online need the worksheet? I'm just trying to check, I don't have Sid stepped out for a second. Is anybody in the chat looking like they need it? Janice? Okay, cool. All right, so you guys are online. You have to do it on your own, but come on back together and share.
So, do you wanna just work on the weekend or bring it?
Found all the stuff that they had, so. Radio station.
You guys wanna participate, you can.
This is challenging, so that's why they asked colleagues to
Yes.
work plan here at 3 p.m. that we could do.
You don't have to do it more yourself.
And they'll, but I said, this is a great idea, why don't we have it at, with elementary, or we could use the, visitor center.
I would say do two because you are each in your ways, right? Yeah, I would say do one for each.
And some of them have HOAs, but I don't know how they work, I don't know how to get into.
What I did is rather than you have to go fill in I just
Yeah, I've had some of that, I started this new cat sitting business, so I've been really focused on how do I get to so, you know, I've gone to that science expo. Basically, everyone in my neighborhood and I in the mailbox, but I'm sticking them behind the flag, it's your mailbox.
On the website.
And so, you know, I'm getting in the neighborhood, some of them are who's there, who's not in. Usually, they're gonna be around their schools, sports.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the PTOs are big, but I don't.
No WHAS and
I've gone to the Chamber of Commerce meetings, I've gone to their mutual business meetings. You know, I'm trying to access what I can, and on Facebook, there's like 6 different groups, so it's like, this is small businesses, you can do businesses.
Exactly, they want large gathering spaces, they skip the
That's why I went to planning department and said,
What do you have, yeah.
I don't know how to do this. You know, you can always set up a table outside of food mart. I mean, everybody's gotta come to the grocery store at some point or another.
You already started.
That's about it. And there's only food. There is no other grocery store. Yeah.
Ashland and Hanover has their local newspaper.
It's a supplement to
Participating in a webinar.
where who I informally report
so
to
most
into
of
the
it's ads.
administration.
I don't know how they see the
It's all just forms.
Okay. But do they more than one neighbor?
Yeah, to keep you abreast of what we're doing, I hear stuff,
Organizations.
and I sit on the
Then it's got some associated press.
community,
I know, that's exactly what
Just once a week. It's also available in different
Okay.
research population as well.
Well, Shalom Farms, I used to be out there before, and they have a mobile market, and they also set up students and whatnot, and some years back, I'm not on their board now, but some years back, they tried it at the bus transfer station. And it
there's
didn't have a
also-
policy with it, so I think they abandoned it, but I think that there's now facility for more space. You know, and I know there are things to talk to them about, it. Some of these projects like farms, they say, bring your mobile market. And they do,
Oh, yeah, yeah, great.
Well, I know there are several, I'm familiar with this, there's short throughs,
And I thought it would be the context of the fact that the city has, Cherokee has
Just make sure it's on 30.
yeah,
so a lot of permanent members.
Actually, we don't have
And
these
it'll be
all
right
those
there, I mean, you know, so, they can set up where they are now and
Not that I'm aware of, no.
anyway, but
And are they running them
they
in
can,
Richmond,
you know, there's a
city
little
Write that part down,
you know,
like,
the
the reason I'm
government
asking is like, where do you want to gather?
Richmond City has a larger neighborhood.
Is there a Facebook there?
To a lot of the leaders
We
in the
have
community.
a town newsletter.
So I guess
that's
for
called
that,
Town.
League of Women Voters.
All
They
the
also
clergy's on there.
That's fine, we didn't ask
You
for
know,
it.
I think the patriots on there.
Yeah, I'm
You know,
super familiar
people
with
who
like
have
community
some
organizations
connection to the county,
seeing,
they'll
like, I know the
say
Twitter
things
people
like,
who
you know,
Richmond.
they have monthly meetings, which I don't get those anymore,
I got off
you know,
and
they'll
changed
say,
that
we
quickly
have a family that needs some bunk beds, you know,
Right,
that kind of thing.
But yeah, I know we have
So,
already the
so
Dirt,
we do
which
have kind of a
is like it's a
subcommittee.
newsletter.
All
We
the
have
clergy
Axios,
are
we probably have more too as well.
And we're
Newspapers are
Yeah.
online.
Local branch of
I would think
but the Richmond branch of it is
I'll
really
put
good.
down here,
And it's probably regional, Richmond region, not specific to the city, so Axios probably covers your
it's
area
really
as well.
well.
Yes, yeah, I'm trying to
There's
find
a lot of new
churches.
subdivisions.
Yeah.
And one of them is major
Yeah, it's
street.
the ultimate
I
fun.
think you're right.
You know, I
Yeah.
newfangled,
Yeah.
that's really how I
That's-
view.
I definitely know some
what
of the-
Entry to those
I
is
can hear
literally
with
boots
that.
on the ground.
Some of them are
Yes.
really
Knocking on doors and saying,
Because
hey,
they
I'm
get
coming.
to be
Brad actually was here.
HOA.
Oh, it's
Right, right.
Or do you have an
I write
HOA?
a
They,
Right.
paragraph sentence.
They're one of
get
the
it into-
more active ones.
And occasionally, the county administrator will send out a seasonal newsletter.
All the
The
second
county administrator doesn't do it, the supervisor and the others
They
do.
come back and contact me.
You know, there'll be
I wrote them
updates
down
on
for
that.
Richmond.
Certainly,
They cover Richmond.
you know, I think that, see if there's
They
a
also cover
better
Virginia
place to put that.
Most Virginia politics happen in Richmond, during like the GA session. They do a lot
Some
of
of
Yeah.
them,
I'd be incredibly valuable because I
no
use
report on
these
it.
now, taking what they got and trying to get the wording right and then
Restaurants are
thinking
popular.
about who would be reading. And that's really hard.
There's a farmer's market
Yeah.
that's
I know.
every Saturday
I know
morning.
it's generally
from
so
8
hard
to
to do.
9.
So I have to put it in words
So,
that
look at that.
still bridge the
They're gonna have a dog event that Parks and Rec and the Sheriff's
Well, they
Department
should,
put out in
they should try
April.
to.
They have a lighting the tree
well, I don't
event
know
in
what
the fall,
the
or
broadcast
end of November for Christmas.
Channel 17.
Um,
We've got on channel 17. It's,
Seems like some of those could be opportunities
Yeah.
for outreach.
It's almost exclusive.
Anytime there's a community-wide event.
See,
I know we are
exactly,
I think one of the, I spin that challenges with those is that
You have town count.
what's sort of a singular focus, and that is
Is
to
that
attend the event,
PBS?
so.
Yeah.
I have no
Channel
idea.
23.
I don't
Rather than
know.
Violent College,
Yeah,
and came
yeah,
with
it's a little bit.
transportation
Would you
service.
put-
Well, you can get 23.
Take one couple of minutes, just walk away.
And to talk about.
Yeah,
Or
Or
give them a
give us a little
postcard.
and say,
Yeah.
here's what you mind, taking this home and
Yeah.
but there's still other ways to,
Might be.
That's a good to probably there, raising.
That's small, I think, right? Like,
So,
Right, I know.
I can see them when you walk in the grocery store.
There's team set up.
I can't see
Part of
them.
And then it's hard to use and all that.
there's just one
Local library
library.
is a big operation. Virginia Public
Really
Library.
have one middle school.
So-
Don't
We've
put
got
it in
Passion
town.
Library, that's part of the promoting regional library system.
I've been to the Ashland Library, it's cute.
It is.
So the schools could be
Yeah, I
a
like it.
way too. They
Yeah,
could-
yeah,
they
3
could be
elementary
managed,
schools,
I
yeah.
didn't think it
But
was
obviously,
worth it.
Yeah.
that's only a certain population.
Yeah.
A dozen or so, but yeah, one of them is
I
across the
think
street from me.
churches is,
Yeah, so I have access to
Yeah.
that, it's board, I can look at it, put stuff up there. So that's pretty. Where I started having this was physical spaces. Because I've only toured here in the Richmond area or COVID. I have not known
The name of it, the acronym is
so
Where are the large
I
buildings?
don't have a lot of
And use that as
things
a,
in my head,
as a
like where I
beginning
would
to
go
where,
collective
like
you
community
plan an event.
gathering.
is
They
it
have
risk?
events
Well,
churches.
Most of the communities, like,
I think this more than
Wow.
I'm
any
just trying to think
Okay.
the north side, how far
But we're,
community
that's sort of
centers,
our avenue for
all
different ways.
assisting in our community.
Yeah.
Community food, It's up for meeting with them,
Yeah.
make a coalition,
Spaces.
or even just a
Right.
if you how to
Back when Sierra
how to
had
get
been
something needs to begin a part
Yeah,
I did listen,
Well,
and then, you know,
I
our
think
emailing
That's
was.
what we
Tom,
were.
I still go to
That's
the
the
north
trade
end of Eastwood
next door.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah,
I know
I'm still
Franklin
participating in
City,
those.
I see a lot.
I use that, I'll look at that.
Those are hybrid meetings right now,
Yeah.
it's virtually.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And what I've been
We don't have
doing these days is I've started
Maybe we're small.
we've got money
Like
gathering
that, get into
spaces.
like.
spreadsheet, and
Potential places.
on a spreadsheet, I'm having 3 to 4 months summary of previous meetings.
Large gatherings.
upcoming.
I wrote the scripts for that.
I think
I
everybody
wrote,
has
there are a
to
lot of
get one.
churches throughout the
Yeah.
city
The
that
date,
gather, you can list different churches.
Especially
different-
this meeting, one line
Being the
on
Fae is a
what the
Catholic
agenda
space.
is in the next meeting.
Well, we've got Hanover
And then I
RTIT
just sort
facility,
of,
which
after these
originally
board
was,
meetings, we'll just kind of
East First Baptist Church
lift up
in Hanover.
one,
Right.
two, might be
It's,
better.
it's a relatively large old spot.
In RVA.
We've got plenty of space in our new town hall. For Henry Clay Elementary, Davy Elementary, Patrick Henry High School.
And also, you could put some materials on the Bay
Small
Transit.
restaurant, so I've got the police and stuff on it.
Yeah, that could be a way.
Put down the
Flyers.
Yeah,
Posters.
I don't know if that's a
Handouts.
gathering.
Well, the county's not gonna spend it on the front porch, so there's not.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I have friends who go all the time.
Oh, really?
What are they doing with their CPA?
Actually, they care about it. My friend is.
You know, they do get people around, it's just like,
Have you been to Caravani? You know Brady?
my fear is that
Long blonde hair. Yeah, he's very disgruntled. I've known him for a long time. He made my.
We're gonna be good neighbors.
instead
That's my house.
instead of
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
They,
Wanna go?
they
You know,
refinished
or you were
my
set
Pay for Bay
store
Transit,
door
they're
on
already
front.
you know, they really don't think
Have you
micro
met
transit
his
is
kid,
gonna work
Jesse?
there, so, you know,
Brady,
some
Brady
of
has a
their
little baby.
CTA money.
Jesse, he's like 1 year old
I went on
now.
Sunday afternoon.
He's around the shop all the
Money
time.
didn't
Feel
toward,
His wife Lily.
claustrophobic. I should
the
And what is
bigger
crazy
jobs
here is
coming to the parking
Yeah.
lot,
Brady
trying to
takes
get
his
some
own
fish, but that's.
Do stuff. Have you had coffee there yet?
I wonder if it's because it was
Yeah.
actually.
If you go on Saturday morning to Sunset,
You know, that's
almost every Saturday
priority.
morning. Brady's
There was some
drinking free
accidents
coffee.
with Plaza, they shut down the
Bar,
blocks,
but they have set up a bar. He's got an espresso machine
I
that
think
he built
the population got
or like
diffused.
refurbished himself from like
Auto parts and
Okay,
Buc-ee's.
that's helpful.
like a hand pulled espresso and
What about
just
like
makes
business?
espresso for
It's,
people.
well, the Buc-ee's and Union
Competition for the
Because they're,
Yes.
they're really
Well,
wanting
it's-
to
it's
fix
good
them, they
to-
want
it's
Buc-ee's to
free.
come in.
Yeah, I love
Start
Caravani.
generating some
Of course, I
revenue,
used to
but,
go the
Buc-ee's
old
says
one.
no, because you're not booked for all this traffic until you get that interchange right.
They need a commitment.
Elaine and Jimmy are great people.
So I'm sure that working on something
Jimmy's
that they
basically
didn't get
retired.
enough money from,
your house
I guess, from
But they have been
CEO or
very good to
CBT, I don't
open
know
up
which,
shop,
but
to
they didn't
have
get enough
meetings.
money that they
The
thought
National
they
Museum
could
has
get.
had a couple of meetings there as well, some of the
They didn't have,
organizations.
they
That's
didn't have
great.
representation
Yeah,
for communications,
Oh,
and I don't think they made
And
the
Caravani
extra.
is personal
You think
for
it was just
people.
nice, that's what
They
happened.
love the community
Yes.
there. They're small town people.
Yeah.
They like being town. I know Brady is much more small
Yeah,
town.
Trish was the one that just.
They've also, they have a lot of services and I keep encouraging them in
Spring.
meetings to
Originally was
talk
made
about
out
the
Is it called
other
the Churchill
services that
newsletter?
everybody thinks about, the industrial
understanding.
antiques that they black, they also do wiring,
4 hours.
they also do refinishing and repair work on old
I don't even
stuff.
know.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a great shop.
Small gathering spots, Depot, the Caboose, Trackside Restaurants, National Museum, our vice president.
There's the Newtown Charles
We
City
open up our doors for small.
Can I make a note of that?
It comes out every week,
I just
every
listed the
2
ones that I've
weeks.
been to, like, there's a Planned Parenthood Training
It's
Center
free.
across the street from me, and they use that training
How
center.
they
for
distribute it.
meetings.
They put it in
Fund
stores.
support.
They used to mail it one week and put it in stores the next, and they
use that
eliminated the
for
maintenance,
meetings all
so
the time.
they put it in food line, they put it in the library, they have
Our
distribution.
council person,
And then there's a time
They
where
don't need the obvious
and that's
ones.
like.
Oh,
Especially
Thompson's,
for-
I know
Is the new Kent,
association meets there a lot.
newspaper
They
still
have
online
like a
as well?
meeting room off on the
Yes.
side.
It's terrible there.
There's
I
a
mean,
church
but
in
you
Carytown
get
called
the
the
basics.
Basics.
Right,
Really,
right.
you read,
Community.
you got busted for
meeting
drugs.
packets that they
Maybe
basically
I
that
just
kind of
staple
thing,
that
but,
It's exclusively for
but
community meetings.
the editor is a teacher or something, and they're all
Just there
terrible.
to
The
like.
grammar's
community
terrible,
organizations.
sometimes you read it, and you can't even understand what it's saying.
Was a big
But
part of.
it's a job done.
Right,
It's a
right.
big,
And, you know,
like
it's
activist space.
something,
Yes,
at least they're still in business.
Yes,
you
it's
know?
there.
Was there to do organizing for the community. Our civilian review board came
What's
out
the,
of diversity thrift. Yeah,
progress
that's where that was first built up.
They're,
Not for global coffee
Virginia's
companies,
the
but
highest
We're
Well,
coming
has
along,
massive
they,
It's
county, I
right
guess,
next
is
to,
using some of the federal dollars,
We know
Right.
them a little bit.
brewery.
and I guess some
Highly
state dollars as
Oh, yeah,
well.
like years ago.
To, some of the counties
Yeah,
have
that's
gone
true.
with,
What about the,
like
you know, the
Atlantic
whiskey
Broadband or,
the Richmond
Not
local
the
whiskey.
station.
For the entire region. They're right next to that, they're across the street from them. I believe it's just.
anyway, they,
Yeah.
in the,
So
like
they're
King
an
William
expedition.
went with them
They want
to,
to have the best coffee.
to put fiber optic in
I
where
would
the
really
electrical
believe in
works
stations
were.
more
New
than
Kent,
we're
behind that, and they contracted with Cox, which was already the cable provider. And so they're doing it now, they're probably tearing up my fresh air today. But, you know, they're putting conduits, I guess,
Yeah.
for fiber.
Even if you still
and put them in near the, on that speed.
It's up in the air to begin with, you just can't.
So, you know, I don't know how it's all gonna be
Yeah,
implemented,
it's a
if
little bit-
they
it's a little
gotta
bit- they're open a
flip
little
a
bit longer
switch
on
for
weekends.
one, ahead of another, I don't know
Yeah.
how it's working, but, a lot of the places that
Yeah,
have
so that's where I had for
that,
small
you know,
gathering spaces.
at all.
Obviously, there's
You know,
probably
um,
hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
We first had Verizon out there, and they said, we're never gonna put in,
Spaces
we're
like
gonna
this.
use copper, we're never gonna upgrade your line, because they got some.
Because I was part of the
Stones
Music
ago,
Business
and ticked
Association,
off and said, we're
I
never
know where
doing
they
this.
meet.
This is one of the techs told me.
Okay.
So.
And so
Okay.
then eventually,
Going
they
down
just
lower,
you
yeah,
know, the need to do Zoom, so everything was on hold, I couldn't get online, it was so slow, so.
Well, we don't have
But
it.
with Cox.
Yeah.
And it was better, it's still not great,
Right.
so I'm anxious to see what it's like when they upgrade.
3 more minutes.
And I hope they don't
3 more minutes.
have
Oh, okay.
another tier
That's
you
true.
have to
We
pay
got
for.
your Barbara,
With
you got Hanover.
all that
Right,
government
yeah,
money
probably
there.
had
Right,
You know,
right.
so-
Yeah.
What about,
Be able to phone a friend.
I know,
School.
and I knew she was
I was gonna advertise in that, a little magazine that comes out every couple of weeks. They wanted
Randolph Bacon?
Yeah, yeah,
$300 a month
that's in Ashland.
with a
I mean,
minimum
they're
contract
a
of
pretty
12
significant
months.
community.
I said, I can afford that.
All the students
I'm
there.
sorry.
For this new Kent neighbors.
They probably
magazine.
Oh, okay.
I think most counties have
Right, right.
some kind of neighbors.
Yeah,
magazine
some
No,
where
they're a player,
they
they
let
know
businesses
business.
to like.
But you're
pay
right, I had
for
forgotten, Randolph Bacon has a number of spots that they.
Well, they're,
Meeting spaces.
any,
They probably also.
recreation associations,
I'm sure we know that, right, but you know, this is why we're doing this, is to make sure we don't miss them.
I know that
We're usually
Yeah.
connected to the
to the
neighborhood.
subdivisions, yeah.
There's not
I know
much
that up
connection
this way,
between the students in the school and.
My daughters have all done,
There is
summer
good
swim
connection between.
through an organization called the Greater Richmond Aquatic
Not with
Yeah.
the students.
Yeah, the town doesn't really
Mostly just
identify with the
recreation
students.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
They don't identify much. with
Again, that might be another way.
Yeah.
Again,
All
people that come to the swim meet,
Yeah.
they're there for the swim meet,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
you might still
Encourage student
They were
participation.
heavily involved.
postcards or something.
All votes, the Ashland
Okay,
Museum,
yeah.
does sponsor the
Yeah.
trivia night on the third Thursday of each month. at,
What I wanna know is
Arch Beer,
how y'all.
operated.
and has good
That-
student participation.
That's good. There's
That's a
no
good meeting
involvement
spot
with
to
the
mention
county
as
Parks and
well.
Rec,
Right,
it's just.
right.
Because that's like the main place that the students
Yeah, they
interact
probably
with,
do, cause you
Ashland,
know, there's a
the-
lot of soccer, they've got a
seems
whole
like
new
Origin
park
is the
out
place
there,
that
with
they-
soccer
Yeah,
fields
with
and
soccer,
stuff.
there's
Yeah.
soccer leagues,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
But the only space is in their garden.
1 more minute.
Out back.
I don't know any commercial civic associations, because that's just not my space. I'm just not really
We've got Market Asset Partnership in downtown Ashland, so.
I have a neighbor around the corner.
Oh,
from me
that's a
who
good
does
point.
the same
Very
thing.
technology
Up at City Forum Society.
Definitely exists.
All got a pretty good library.
It's gonna take a long time to haul all this stuff out.
Takes his kids, drops them off.
Newcat and Charles City together formed the Heritage Library. And so Charles City built a new structure out of their courthouse.
Oh, okay.
Newcat took over one of
We wave at each other.
the
Okay, yeah,
buildings
yeah.
with one of
It's all right.
the
And his
very disappointed, there was
oldest
this
child now is
Maidstone
able to ride her
landing
own
that
bus.
was
Yeah.
modeled after this village in Newcat,
Yeah.
and it looked very
They still
promising in the
travel
recession.
together.
And a lot of the
He
things that went
escorts her
in
on
there,
her lines to
including this
school
bank,
and-
Colonial, whatever it was, went out of business. And so the county bought that, and
Alright.
that's.
That is so
I know where
dangerous.
the groups of
keep this
and keep
merchants that
I-
I know
sure
Brooklyn
there's
Park
an
Mall,
NAACP.
Alright, I'm gonna
close-knit.
collect them
I
just a
don't know
minute,
if they
hang
have
on
an
this
actual
while we
association.
talk. Alright, I'm gonna bring us back
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, do you know if they have like a?
If you're
civic
online,
association?
get your ideas ready.
Seems like.
Okay,
Get the last 2 pages. Didn't have it.
okay, pairs, how'd that go? Who's got the best answer in the room? I would love you to share.
To which question?
Whichever question you would like, Upton.
Well, the center of the universe should have some good responses.
We've got excellent responses.
Let's hear 'em.
I don't wanna show up everybody else.
Yeah, that's
Feel
fair.
free.
Yeah.
Don Root, are you out there? Do you wanna show up?
Do I want to show up everyone else? Go for it.
Cool. Well, just tell us one really great idea that came out from each of your pairs. How about that? Because a lot of this, we're in similar worlds, right? I think a lot of us know some of the same things. What I'm trying to get at are the parts that are lesser known. So I would love if maybe from each pair, if somebody could just share like, what was an aha you had, or a, ooh, I didn't think about that.
Well, one thing I didn't think about was leveraging off Randolph-Macon College.
Okay,
For meeting rooms, for input. We so often sort of ignore the fact that they're there, although we know that they're there. But the students don't typically take a great active part in what happens. They come to Andrews Town to do all their partying and stuff. And
okay.
unfortunately buying stuff, but I added Randolph-Macon College as
Great.
something to add.
Thank you.
Washington and Franklin Hall on the Randy Mack campus. And I've also, from experience, availed myself of their cafeteria for a statewide meeting on a weekend. Yeah,
Okay.
and we had it catered by the cafeteria. That worked out.
Good idea.
That's helpful. Thanks, Michael.
That was 25 years ago.
I think we've changed caterers since.
Okay.
I'll add, at least with the online publications, there are a lot more than I thought about.
Okay.
This came up to a lot, and, you know, whether it's